Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Chris Honda, is the Manager of Security, Risk, and Compliance at Plotly. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Pete. Really appreciate you bringing me on and happy to chat today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've made a ton of changes. I like to say I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. I've been here at Plotly for, I have to stop and do the math, which is not my strong suit today. But coming up on a year pretty soon in just the next couple of months. I'm running the security risk and compliance program. Right now I'm a team of one, so we're doing a lot of building. We're trying to figure out how to make security and risk a good differentiator with how we handle it on the back end for our customers. And I'm coming off of 6 years at a vendor company called Wistic that did third-party risk management. They're still around. And I got my start in security there. I started as a software engineer, and I just kind of fumbling around trying to figure out what I could do. And I found a really good opportunity to start in the compliance space, build a security program, and then build a broader GRC program, privacy, and then of course AI in the last couple of years, and been just trying to figure out how to make that work here as well. And I really get a kick out of building things. So that's where we are, and I'm having a blast working with folks and trying to make security something that people aren't afraid to embrace, not afraid to work with, and see that as a good thing for not only our customers, but for our internal working as well.
Yeah, and so if you can phrase it as security compliance as a business enabler, obviously that's ideal. I think a lot of folks are struggling with that these days, and part of the reason you see like a compression, I guess, in squished budgets right now is, security is seen as a cost center versus revenue generator or business enabler. So I think especially for startups to be able to say, hey, we got our SOC 2, now we can sell to enterprise customers, that's obviously a big push. And well, let's not get started down the road, I guess, of SOC 2 quality and checking a box and that sort of thing. But focus of the show being more so on the talent side of things. So do you think the talent gap is real in security in GRC?
I think so, but not in the way that a lot of folks talk about it, right? Especially once we get into the famous metrics like 400,000 unfilled positions, right? That's where I think it's not what folks are putting it out to be. I think that there is a talent gap in that we're not getting people in the right positions at the right time, and that we're just kind of expecting a perpetuity of the status quo, meaning, right, like we have folks that are in senior leadership and they've been leading and strategizing for organizations for the last couple of decades. And then we have the more seasoned individual contributors and middle managers, right, that have also been around for a while and have been building and driving a lot of change. And of course, some are either career changers or early job seekers just out of a school, moving out of a different role, right, out of a couple of years of software engineering or system administration into security roles. But I think something that we're seeing is that it's really top heavy, and pretty soon we're going to start seeing a bunch of VPs, a bunch of CISOs, a bunch of CSOs and CIOs retiring pretty soon. The hope or the understanding is that a lot of those folks that have been in like these tech lead or middle management roles moving up to there, but we don't really have a lot of folks that are just running the SOC or moving into some of these entry level positions. And like you said, because of budget constraints, because of resource constraints, security and risk and compliance being seen as a cost center instead of something that's actually going to drive and differentiate business value. And I think that we're going to come to a reckoning before long. Like, I don't think it's probably not going to be this year, but I think the next 5-10 years, it won't be unreasonable for us to say, how are we going to do everything if everyone that is moving up is going to be doing the strategic, but not hands-on keyboard? And there's just too much work to do for everyone to be a player coach, I think is the term, right? Where you're just finding the strategy and doing it. It's that's where I think the real talent gap is making sure that we have people in the position to understand what needs to be done and to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you could summarize that as we have a massive succession planning problem. And I totally agree. You don't see very many entry-level roles anymore. And I mean, you could certainly make the argument that security is not an entry-level position. You have to understand the technology to be able to secure it. And I think you're obviously a good example of that, starting as a software engineer. But do you think it's possible or even optimal, I guess, for security to be like a true zero experience entry level role? Or is it necessary to have some foundational professional experience in technology before moving into security?
I think in an ideal world, which of course we don't live in, I think that there are ways to handle that, or maybe in close to ideal situations, we probably could, in some circumstances, get people in a situation, in a position where they could learn a lot of the fundamentals and contribute meaningfully in a security context or in a risk and compliance context, privacy, right? There are ways to do that. The trade-off is the cost, right? Is the mentorship, and if you don't have a solid background or foundation in a technology role, in a tech role, in one capacity or another, that's where it becomes tough, and you need extra support, extra mentorship, extra guidance, right? I mean, in short, I don't generally like the term in this context, but hand-holding, right? I mean, people that want to learn are really good at learning in my experience. If you're engaged in the topic and you really want to make an impact and do certain things, most people will be really enthusiastic and will put in the effort and will learn. What's tough about that is, right, is the investment and the commitment. Is not only do you have someone performing a role that needs to happen, doing a job that needs to happen and needs to happen pretty well, pretty quickly, but you have to have someone that's doing a different job showing that person how to do it. And that's why I say in an ideal situation, we'd be able to make those investments. I think in reality, right, based on where we're at right now, in general, in the industry, it's a lot tougher. And that's where you're seeing a lot of these entry level security roles where you need 3 to 5 years in a very closely related field, again, like system administration or software engineering, because you need to be able to make that impact really, really quickly with minimal guidance and directions. Here's the objective: go create the solution and make it happen. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
that's what it is.
no, I totally agree that we don't live in a perfect world. Like in theory, of course, there could be such thing as an entry level security role, but in practice, in reality, less common because there's no real incentive for the hiring managers to hire somebody that they need to spend that much time on, uh, in like you said, invest in, when they can get a more immediate payoff with somebody that's maybe already mid level that's willing to work for the same amount of money as that truly entry level person. It's like there's just no real business case to be made there. And that's just a nature of job market right now, with so many people flooding the market and the large layoffs with the larger companies. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think eventually we're going to run into this pipeline problem where in 5, 10 years, maybe we don't have enough of those senior individual contributors that everybody wants to hire to run the tooling because nobody's taken up the mantle to train them today. So do you see that? Is there a solution there? Or is it just, do what you can, maybe try to stand up an internship program at your company, but realistically, maybe it's not going to happen en masse?
I think you really nailed it with that last part. I don't think there's going to be really a timely and mass adoption of a succession strategy, or an effective one at least.
Hmm.
A lot of the chatter, and I don't fault anyone for it, because right, we if the business doesn't exist now or in 1 year, there's no point in planning for 5, 10 years in the future, right? I get it from that perspective, and that's, I think, maybe paraphrased or tacitly what's being said by a lot of other leaders is, I want to do this, but I have a lot of really pressing problems now that might make these other succession related problems moot, essentially, before we get to that point. So I mean, I know that there's attempts, especially in really robust industries, or sub segments of industries and companies where the companies are thriving and they're looking to invest. Those tend to be bigger, larger enterprises. Um, and I've seen some efforts to, I mean, not a very public degree, but again, I don't fault them for that, right? I think it's just how you go about it, and you have to do it in a scalable way. But I've heard of attempts being done, and I'm really interested to see how they turn out. And like you said, it's sometimes it's a technology rotation program. For example, right, you might be hired as a software engineer, but over the course of 2 years, you'll still be engineering, and you'll have, I don't know, 10 apprenticeship hours a week or something like that, doing cloud engineering or network engineering, and then security or operations, like revenue operations type thing, right? So I've seen some of those programs work, and a lot of really, really successful, smart, impactful, and influential people come out of those programs. So we could do that. But I think the flip side of that is those are the companies that have the resources and the flexibility to do so, right? They're looking to keep those people internal forever. And I don't blame them because it is a huge investment. But, right, you think about the average small startup that's just trying to make sure that they're right hitting good revenue numbers and just trying to stay afloat. That's a huge investment that might not pay off. And I mean, even worse, that might bring detriment because those resources could be deployed more effectively somewhere else. So I think it could be there, but I think also, and not to point fingers in other directions of factors that we can't influence, right? But I mean, look at the state of the job market in general, even outside of security, what the economy is doing. Who knows what tomorrow's going to look like? And I think that uncertainty and therefore risk is just felt generally. I mean, again, even outside of security, right? We're looking outside of security vendors, businesses in general right now just aren't generally taking risks, and that's a big risk. Tomorrow is a risk. Today is what we need to focus on. I think is the headline.
Yeah. I mean, you could also almost kind of look at it in investment terms. There's, a lot of companies looking to quote unquote invest in the equivalent in talent of CDs versus something like highly risky individual stocks in tech companies or something like that, which
Mhm.
would be the entry level person, for instance. So maybe a good analogy there. I don't know. So what do you think companies are doing right on the hiring front? I think we could talk a lot about what they're doing wrong as well, but any thoughts on either of those?
Yes, and definitely a bit of both. And I mean, personally, I like focusing on like, hey, this is what we're doing right, and maybe how we can accentuate those benefits and that value more instead of focusing on the doom and gloom, right? Mostly just because a lot of people are focusing on the negative side, right? I think it's important to recognize both. I think that some things that companies are doing better, again, not ideal world, but for what people need to do, they're getting better, and I think, I mean, you're this is purely just my opinion, but folks like you that are really specialized and know people that have done a job, they're getting better at finding someone that says, "Hey, I can do ABC. You need ABC. Done it before, willing to do it again, and this is how I can do it even better than I did last time because this is what I've learned for." Right? When you only have X amount of budget and you got someone like, "Hey, like that's my budget, and I can do exactly what you're asking for because I've done it and I can prove it." That's something great, right? It comes at the trade-off of innovation from the perspective like, look, like we just need to do this job, not figure out something brand new, but this is what we know we need and maybe push it. I feel like that's a really good match because you got someone that can do the things that you know you need to do and therefore can probably invest a little more into doing the things that you don't know that you need to do or that you don't know that you actually want and something that'll be good, right? So for example, in the GRC space, right? Let's take I just need someone to stand up my SOC 2 and maybe next year get us ISO 27001 or the trifecta, depending on how aggressive we want to go. And that's going to open up a lot of business for us because right now we're a small startup and we're starting to hit that no from a compliance perspective from our customers. So yeah, over the course of a year or two, I could do that. Also, because I've done that, I know I can start investing more time and energy in this cool new, I mean, not new concept, but this more popular concept called GRC engineering. Not only is that going to give you what you want, right, what you're originally asking for in this box, it's going to do it better, more effectively, and is going to help internal processes, right? And that's where the gravy is from the business perspective. Okay, now you're value add. You're not just a cost center. We're not just barely breaking even in terms of what we're asking for you and willing to give you in exchange, but you're now making things better. And I think that that's something that a lot of companies are starting to recognize is if we can get someone that's done it before, we don't need to teach them, don't need that hand holding, or in the more, I guess, refined terms, if we don't need to make that same time investment in someone new, then we know that there's going to be outsized benefit over time. So that's one of the I think that's one of the things that companies are getting better doing. And like I said, it's folks like you that know the industry, have the relationships, and can make those connections. One of the things that we're not doing quite as well is starting to is we've not moved away from the do more with less mentality. And I'm not saying like, oh well, we should decrease efficiency because I think that's one of the terms that you can bundle it up and right. That's what it is. But I think we're getting to the point to where is, oh, well, if you can't do it, just make AI do it, right? I like to say just AI-ify it, right? And I think we're still overly reliant on the mentality that some things can just be automated, where, again, my opinion, but I don't think it's an unpopular or uncommon opinion. In my opinion, it's very risky, and I dare say a dangerous bet to make, to say, hey, we're okay letting the robots make decisions for us without review, without an intimate knowledge and understanding of how AI, how the
Nella
machine, how the automation came to
and
this
peace
conclusion. Because
is
is
baby.
not going to hold up in court if you say, hey, this is the decision that we made on. We took these risks because the computer said so, because AI said so, and it turned out really poorly. That's not going to stand up in court and say, well, this is the analysis. There has to be people understanding what the factors and the inputs of the calculations are, so that when things don't go according to plan, we can at least say we were aware of the risk, and this is how we did our best to manage it, and this is just the outcome. But we're seeing a lot of that, man. I tell you, it's we're and it's not meant to be a downplay on AI. There's lots of great applications. I mean, I think actually you said it before, and I've come to appropriate it. I'm not anti-AI. I am AI skeptical. We're saying just because you can, the way that I say it's the Jurassic Park rule, just because you can doesn't mean you should. It should be the right tool at the right time. And I think we're still on the early side and in the early stages of figuring out, okay, what's going to be best for us from this perspective.
Well, yeah, and then you have to figure out how to govern and secure all these automations in AI that you're
Yep.
bringing in, which creates a whole new list of tasks essentially
Yep.
that unless you have a machine watching a machine, it's going to have to be a person necessarily.
Mhm.
Because the buck has to stop with a human at some point in the chain of command, essentially. Um, I guess the question then is like, do you disperse the risk in that respect, or do you have a single point of failure where all of the responsibility and accountability rests on a single head for, say, an entire department?
I mean, that's a good question, and also I think a very valid and very impactful conversation that I've seen happening in the community, in the broader community. And I think it depends. I mean, I know we all hate that answer, but we also give that answer a lot. I think it depends on the context, right? Small startup, it's probably not reasonable for the whole ELT, executive leadership team, or senior management team to sit behind every decision, right? And someone might have to be willing to say, look, like, this is under my ownership. This is the vision. This is what we've agreed on. I'll make this happen. Right. I think that that's something that we see a non-trivial number of times floating around. Whereas I think that ideally, again, in many situations, I'd hesitate to say most, but in many situations, it'd be good to have a small council or committee that says, well, from a governance standpoint, what risks are we going to be willing to accept, or what is our threshold? What's our tolerance? And that's going to depend, again, by industry, by company size, by product, by customer base. But I think that at least having that conversation, in almost every case, it'll be best to have a couple people from, even just from a redundancy standpoint, to say, okay, this is what we know we can accept, and this is how we're going to act in these situations, right? There's going to be lots of changes over time, and you can't really foresee all the situations. But if you have more than one person, more than one set of eyes on it, I think that's where you have more effective governance, because you're not getting the same blind spots that you have when it's just this person's responsibility. So, like you said, it's still shaking out, but I think the more input, up to a certain extent, the more input that we can get, the better. And once we've come to certain thresholds and agreements, you make the decision and you pivot as needed. Otherwise, we're never going to get anywhere, right? If every decision is takes a long time and is scrutinized, it just slows everything down, and we can't do slow right now. No one can, I think. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's certainly the case in my experience. Granted, I tend to work with a lot of startups from Series A to Series C. But yeah, it's always move as quickly as possible. If we run into problems, we'll figure out that later. But for now, we just need to act. Which, obviously you can encounter some downstream consequences of that when you're moving so quickly.
yep.
Well, and efficiently, and leveraging a bunch of tooling that well, I think that's one thing we're going to see too, as in 5 to 10 years, maybe, as we don't have enough senior individual contributors. to run a lot of the tooling, and companies have experimented with a lot of the tooling. Maybe they're discovering then that it's actually more difficult to manage all of these things, and it's not completely autonomous. Then that could exacerbate potentially what could be some future shortages on the staffing side in the coming years. We'll just have to see, I guess. But
Yep.
what do we do in the meantime? Like, it seems like the number of job seekers tends to outpace the number of open jobs. It's kind of hard to get a sense for if that's actually true or not. But I mean, if every job posting gets 1,000 applicants, the chances that there's more applicants than jobs is pretty high. I mean, obviously you're going to get redundancy in people applying to multiple jobs, but um, still. So do you think that there's more people on the market than jobs, or no?
Yes, and this is where I'd have to lean on your experience, and a lot of my experience is also purely anecdotal. I shouldn't say that. I mean, a lot of it is firsthand, but anecdotal. And this is over the course of the last several years, right? Ever since we started this layoff train and downsizing train, it certainly seems to be the case. And right, like you hear about ghost, what do they call them? Ghost jobs or phantom jobs, right? Where there's a wreck out there, and allegedly there's not actually any intention to fill that. Not casting allegations or anything, just like that's one of those big things is how do you handle that? How do you deal with that? Because if there's inaccurate data or data that doesn't play by the same rules, how do you know? But I think that's one of those things that you can't argue with is that, right, even if there was a lot of jobs, right? Let's say hypothetically that 400,000, 1,000,000, however, whatever that wild range is of open jobs, and they are all real and intending to hire in the next 6 months. I think that's still indicative that there's just more people that want these kinds of jobs than there are open jobs for. Um, and I think that, I mean, maybe this is jumping the gun a little bit in terms of things that we want to discuss, but I mean, one of the suggestions that I give to folks for that is, look, like if you keep hitting your head on the same wall and it's not cracking, it's not breaking, and you can't just like morph through the wall. I know that's not the right verb, but I can't think about it, right. You can't just like bend
Phase through. Yeah.
there we go. Right. You can't just phase through it. I think that's where I'm never going to tell you to give up, especially if you know that this is what you want to do for whatever reason, whatever experience, your passion, your interest. I'm never going to tell you to give up on it. I think I would say it's time. It might be worth your time and effort to try different strategies. And one of the things that I found, and this is from my experience, right? I told you I've had a couple different careers and in different lives. I mean, I've worked in education and sales and investment finance. One of the ways to get into these kinds of weird tech roles, because we have such a blend of different skills, different experience and output, is to take a different kind of job, right? Like, look, if you want to be in security, try and go the software engineering route. I know that's a totally different concern in terms of how you get in there, but consider that if you might have the skills or if you have the connections, or look at some of the more non-security specific IT roles. Get into customer success if you're open to it and enjoy, and it might be enjoyable to try sales, right? Because everything relates to security. And I say that because I spend more of my day talking with everyone else about their problems than I do thinking and sitting about security and compliance and privacy and AI. So I mean, right, there might be a logical fallacy in there, probably, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say that, look, like if you want to do security and you don't have the experience, get some experience in something else and say, I want to do security stuff. Let me do things, right? I mean, I think that does logically follow, right? Where there's just not enough people to do the things that need to happen. If I had a salesperson say, "Hey, I'm happy to take those questionnaires because I know you hate them, and it'll help them with their job, right? Because then they don't have to wait for me to answer them or the sales engineer to answer them." I'm going to be more than happy to say, yes, please take these. I'll help you. But eventually it's going to come to the time where you can do those without me. Or if you're an engineer and you want to get into security, hey, like I'll take the vulnerability scanning triage and I'll take that off your plate. So you don't have to worry about that. Awesome. Something you have to do anyways. It's within the realm of your experience or something reasonably easy to learn based on your day job. And that makes you the next logical candidate to say, hey, when we have an opening, why not this person? Because they're already doing a big part of the job. And I think that's part of how we address it, right? And again, not ideal. I'm not saying that this is the way that it should be, but in spite of the lack of transparency and directness of how the process should work logically, right? You apply for the job, you get a fair shot and fair conversation. There's just too many people having that conversation with recruiters, with hiring managers, right? Let's try a different way in. Might take longer, but in the meantime, you're learning, you're making money, you're getting exposed to other people and other ideas and other areas of business, right? You might find that you don't want to do security. I'm not saying that I hope you find that out, but when I started security, I want to be a pen tester. Now, that's one of the last roles that I want to do. Nothing against it. It's just not for me because I tried some of the things that go into that and I found it's not for me. So, I mean, this wild journey that we're on in terms of careers is just finding what we want to do, and any exposure you can get before you dive head in and neck deep is going to be a huge win. So, like I said,
Yeah.
might be a bit of a tangent, but man, it's frustrating finding a job. So let's get creative.
Yeah, yeah, you absolutely need to get creative and find different ways to build experience if you don't have any. I mean, that was the catch-22 I encountered coming out of school back in, late '08 when the market was crashing. Uh,
Oh,
I,
yep,
I, I just, I had no experience. I had no internship. I just had a degree in marketing, and nobody would give me a shot because I didn't have any experience, and I didn't realize that I really needed an internship and a portfolio and all these different things
yeah,
because nobody told me.
yeah,
So yeah, that's the best thing you can do is find adjacent roles. And if you're interacting with the security team on a regular basis, they're more likely to recognize your transferable skills than a hiring manager reviewing an application where you're one out of a thousand. Like
yep,
those, your proximity to security is extremely important. You have to be in the situation. You have to put yourself in the situation to get lucky and get what you want. So it's a numbers game to some degree, but it's also a strategy thing. You need to be adjacent to the role or the people that you want to become. Um,
mhm.
and finding a mentor is a big part of that too. I think there's so many online communities where you can find a mentor, and if they think you're amazing, they'll vouch for you, and you can basically leverage their network as well. Um, so yeah, I think that the talent is not evenly distributed is the problem. So, we have tens of thousands of people looking to break into security right now, whereas we may have, I don't know, 100 people that are AI security experts in the US, for instance, or in a specific geography. The
Yep.
delta in terms of orders of magnitude there is pretty crazy. So there may be more jobs than people in certain disciplines and more people than jobs in other areas or seniority levels. So we have kind of a matching problem where there's not the right number of each, jobs and people, and that goes up and down depending on, the skill set and seniority level. So, yeah, there's really no way around that, I don't think, because there's a market demand for certain skills and not others, for certain seniority levels and not others. That's why I think often it's the candidates that get all the good advice about, how do we market ourselves better? How do we apply to the right roles? How do we network? There's a lot of that advice out there, but I wanted to start the podcast because I think we can be doing things better from the hiring perspective as well to recognize transferable skills. In this market, probably less practical, as we had discussed, but you know, um, what do we do about the volume issue, though? It seems increasingly as the tooling gets better, recruiters are, on the internal side, they may have 20, 30 open jobs at once, each one getting 1,000 applicants. That's so much volume to parse through
Yep.
versus, the applicants. Now they're using tooling to automate their applications and, tailor make their resume through AI to each job. So we have machines talking to machines and a ton of volume. Any thoughts on how we can square that circle?
Yes, and I think you kind of scratched it a little bit. And again, not an ideal solution based on how things are right now, but right, you got to do things different if you want different results, is the way that I see it. I know that it's happening on a non-trivial degree, but I think that we'd really benefit if we leaned into it. And that is right now, as machines talking to machines, the more people to people conversations we have, the better it's going to be. For example, right? Like, and that's where I love talking with you, with a lot of hiring managers, like people that just, I know they're going to be hiring, whether because of high turnover or I know they're going to be growing, that their team's going to be growing. Other recruiting firms, individuals, The more people I know that are in a position to either hire someone or get them connected to someone to be hired, the happier I am. Because on more than one occasion, I've had a friend that's either looking for an internship or just got laid off. I've been able to say, hey, I know someone that has a role out in your area of interest or your area of expertise. Let me get you connected. And I mean, like I said, it's not as high as I'd like it to be, but it bypasses the process. And right, it sucks for the people, the 1,000 people that are sitting in line putting in an application, but that's how we're doing it, right? That's just how it's happening. I think it's really rare for someone to get hired in a role unless there was some sort of prior relationship with the company or with someone in a position to influence that decision or worked with them before, right? How often do we hear about a CISO leaving and then in the 6, 9, 12 months following, they bring their whole team from the last company, right? We operate on trust. I know we're not the only industry to do that, but I think that due to the nature of our work and the subject material that we work with, trust is paramount, right? And that's where a lot of the networking comes in. Having a community is the more that you're around someone and around people and you talk about the things and demonstrate what you're doing and what you're learning and what you're interested in and your struggles, right? That's the human element, the human aspect of what we do is that is generally right when we do it right or in an honest and genuine and good faith way, we're building relationships. And that's where I think, again, not ideal solution, but the more that folks like me, right? I'm not hiring. I really, really wish that I could. A, I want the help. B, also I want to see the industry grow. Um, the more folks that I can connect with and say, hey, like, let me keep an ear out for you. Let me keep an eye out for you. Let me figure out a better system for my wild brain right now, trying to get people connected. The happier I am. Like it's a real kick and a real thrill. So I think that's something that if I can encourage other hiring managers to do or other senior leaders, even if you're not going to be the one hiring, like if you're a CISO, you got 3 directors and a VP or whatever, and they're going to be all hiring. I would encourage those people in those positions say, hey, like let's keep an eye out for people. Let's go out of our way to build a community so that we can benefit ourselves as a company, as an organization. We can find the people when we need them because we know them and we trust them and they trust us. But B, we can do something good, right? Like I'm a firm believer that when you do good just because you can, not just because you're going to get something out of it, good things come from that. So yeah, I mean, go out there, make friends, be a mentor, and offer to get people connected. Because even if it doesn't benefit you right away, that kid's going to come back in one way or another. So
Oh, for sure. Well, as we kind of discussed before, a lot of hiring is done reactively. We have this specific problem to solve, so we're going to react to that problem and hire somebody to solve that problem.
yep,
But if you're proactive in your networking and you're playing the long game, whether you're a hiring manager or candidate, if you're always putting feelers out there and always meeting new people and always building relationships, um, outside of when you have an immediate need for something, one, you take a lot of the pressure off of relationships because there's no transactional nature to it. It's more just, like you said, about people helping people and just broadening one's network and finding your tribe and who you work best with. And
yep,
once you've established those relationships, those last for a long time. And when you do finally need something or when your connection needs something, you've already made that relationship, and that takes some of the pressure off, I guess, in a lot of these matches. And I'll be the first to say, as an external recruiter, like if you can find people for your organization that you already know and you know that you would enjoy working with, there's no reason to hire me. Like you already have the connections. Like a good example, a buddy of mine, former podcast guest, he just got a VP of sales role for an MSP. They do some CMMC readiness consulting work. And he went to KuiCon and he met a bunch of CMMC salespeople, and he was able to get, 5 or 10 people that all had the exact experience he wanted just by going to a conference. And I don't blame him as much as I wanted to work with him. So yeah, always be networking before you feel like you even need to. It's never going to be a bad thing, basically, investing in your relationships.
and I love that you keep coming back and referring to it as investment because it is, right? I mean, when we think about the best things in life as individuals, as people put aside the professional aspects, but none of them are immediate, right? I mean, we talk all the time about delayed gratification, like how a lot of our world works, right? But social media and how accessible things are, right? when you think about the things that bring us true joy and happiness, not just like, oh, that felt nice or that was enjoyable and then the feeling's gone, right? But the things that last and things that matter and endure, right? Those require investment, right? You think about your best friends. It's not people you hang out at the bar once, right? You have a beer or a good lunch and then you're good and you're just best friends for life, right? It doesn't usually happen that way. It takes time and effort and in one term, investment in the good and the bad times. And if you're willing to do that and extend that, ask for help. I know that's for me, that's one of the hard things. Not just like, hey, I'm in a bad position or hey, I really want my first job, please give me a job, but like show that you value the other person, right? Like everyone wants to feel like they're appreciated and seen as a person, that they have value, I guess, if we want to put it in the more corporate way, right? In the more business language. But right, that's in human terms, we want to feel like people care about us as people. And the more time and effort, genuine effort that you show and give and put to that because you care and you want to do something good, that's where the returns start coming in because that is you investing in other people, in your relationships, in your community, in your network. And that's what ends up coming back to support you when you need it.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's almost as if you really feel like you're in a bad position, and say you've been out of work for 6 months, and you're running through the last of your savings, and you really need a job. That's the worst possible time to be networking. The best possible time was 12, 18 months ago, before you needed to, because now you have, in sales terms, now you have commission breath. Anybody you approach, you sound needy and desperate, and all these things psychologically turn people off.
Yep.
Whether or not they should, you can make the argument that maybe they shouldn't, and people should be empathetic and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, human nature is what it is. You can't help how uh, the human psyche reacts to certain stimuli at the end of the day. So
Yep.
to be cognizant of that, I think is wise. So whether you're, a SOC analyst or a CISO, there's really not enough networking you can do, whether it's, chapter meetings of ISACA or IC squared, or I guess it's IC2 now, or, meetups or RSA. I mean, whatever it is, not everybody has the budget to go to a lot of these bigger things like RSA.
Mhm.
But there's plenty. If you just go to meetup.com, you can meet people that way, or even online communities. A lot of people I talk to, they don't like to do the whole, go to a bar networking event type thing, which I totally get.
Yep.
But in which case, find a subreddit, and a lot of those have job boards. Find these Discord channels that have mentor-mentee sections. There's just so many resources out there, and I feel like people don't often realize what actually exists out there until somebody makes them aware of it. I've talked to some CMMC folks lately, and they'll say, I really don't know where to go to find a job. And I'm like, well, there's actually a Discord channel specifically to CMMC, and they actually have a job board, and you can even post your resume in there proactively, and people can hit you up for any jobs that they might have. But if you didn't know of that individual Discord channel, or somebody didn't introduce it to you, there's no way you would have known. So, awareness is everything, I guess, on that front.
Absolutely. And I think one of the important keys, and again, you hit it, maybe just putting it in my own words and different phrasing is you have to ask. Right. And that's where I know I just said you can't just ask for help, all the things, right? But if you don't ask, the answer will always be no, or you'll never be given what you don't ask for. And so that's where it's like, hey, look, like be right, be genuine. You say, hey, what can I do for you? But it's also not unreasonable to say, hey, look, like this is my area of interest or this is my area of expertise, and I'm feeling a little lost right now, or I need a little bit of guidance, just a nudge in the right direction. I'm not asking for you to hook me up with anyone in particular. Just like, hey, do you know of any Slack, Discord, or Slack workspaces or Discord servers? Right? Do you know anyone that specializes in this or knows where the places are to be, right? Like it's those are one of those small, I mean, for lack of better terms, favors, right? But those things that you can ask for, like, look, like I recognize that you know these things, or maybe if you don't know, but you know where the next step might be, and if you don't ask, you're like, hey, I appreciate the time, which is great. You started the relationship, but if you don't ask, then it's all up to luck, right? And that's one of the nice things, and I hope you agree, but I mean, of the different professional communities that I've been a part of, I feel like the security community, the GRC, right, the broader security GRC community is super welcoming and really gets a kick out of helping other people. And I think that as long as your requests are reasonable and I mean polite, for lack of better words, right? Like you're not demanding time, demanding undue effort, but like, hey, I'd really love just a nudge in the right direction. People usually go above and beyond to say, you know what? I'm actually going to connect you with 3 different people. We'll set up a conference call or something like that. Or if you can meet me at this event, I'll connect you with 10 different people. I know a ton of people in this space, right? People I feel like in our space really like to go above and beyond and make sure that people are connected and have the support that they need. So yeah, you just got to ask. And
Yep.
then once you do, it's the resources are there. You just need someone to help you find it.
Well, to me, I think the term that comes to mind is to be self-aware. So if you're asking for something, be self-aware that you're asking for something. Be careful about the language that you're using and your tone. And
Yep.
like you said, don't be too demanding. I think that's one thing I see quite often from job seekers is it's almost like they expect something from you uh, without wanting to offer anything in return. And it's almost like they deserve it. Entitlement, I think, is the word I would use. So to
Yeah.
be cognizant of that, not to come across as entitled to somebody's time or effort or anything like that, and leading with humility. And if there's anything you can do to show any value as well, of course, that's always to the recipient, I guess, to show value to the recipient. That's a good way to lead as well. Uh, even just to ask, hey, I know I'm new to the industry, but if there's any intros I can make for you, anything, let me know. That sort of thing even just goes a long way.
It's the nature of the gesture and the effort, right? It's
Hmm.
like, right, like we have kids, right? And bless my daughter, I love her so much, right? A lot of times she'll say, "Hey, Dad, I want to help you cook. I'm the cook at home. I want to help you cook." Like, okay, well, this is what we're gonna do, right? I'm not gonna be like, "Hey, just like chop everything up yourself." She's 8, right? So that's where, right, again, taking back from a lot of our other conversations, this investment in time. But the fact that she offers, even though I can't ask her to do a reliable dice or mince on an onion, I appreciate the effort and the offer, and I think that on principle is kind of the same thing, right? I know you're not going to connect me, right? If you're just coming into the industry or you're pivoting, like chances are you're not going to know anyone that I don't know, right? It's possible, but you're asking me for help and connections. And like you said, from the human psychology perspective, I notice and I'm grateful that you offered, and that is not just a what are you asking me to give you? And that I think that sets the tone and the precedent for the rest of the relationship and how that is likely to turn and grow over time is that I know you're willing, so that if I'm ever in a position where I might need something from you, I know you've offered before, and there's a good chance that you will before. Therefore, just reflexively, right, reactively, I'm going to be more willing to give to you ahead, right, up front and first, because this is a relationship that is worth investing in, right? No one wants a transactional relationships where it's like, hey, give me this, I might give you something of value or in return later, right? We want we all want and crave those human parts of a good, healthy relationship where we know we can rely on each other, right? It starts small, but it grows over time, and it starts with the willingness and the gestures.
Absolutely. Well, we're actually coming up on time. It's going by quick, but yeah.
Yeah.
So just one last question for you, Chris. Is there anything we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
Yes, I think so, and it's annoying a bit the way that I look at it, but I think that it's done good for me, and and it's not to anyone else's like, oh, shame on us, we've not been doing this, but I feel like we don't ask ourselves why enough times, right? I feel like a lot of times we'll say like, well, this is why we do it, but right, like I don't know if this is just again like one of the peculiarities that I have with my own personality or the way that I think, but if I can't answer why 3 times when I'm drilling down about a concept or about a project or about a concern or about a problem, I don't understand it. Right. So when we talk about, for example, when the talent gap or okay, how are we going to fix the hiring issue? Right. We know that we're short staffed or we know we can hire people and we've determined that this is the root cause. This is why. But if you stop at that one, I'm very skeptical that that's actually the root cause, right? You think about how many times we've pivoted within how we apply AI in business and how a lot of the problems are still either pinned on or alleged to be solved by AI, but they're not. I think a lot of that comes down to, right, again, very reductively, I think overly reductively, but we don't ask ourselves why enough times. So I think that we need to ask ourselves when we're thinking about, hey, how are we going to approach this? How are we going to solve this? We don't ask ourselves why enough times. And I think we really ought to. So, right, when we're thinking about, okay, we're not going to hire someone else. Why? Because there's budget issues. Why? Because we're not seeing the value in security. Why? Because we're just not communicating in the way that we need to the business layers, right? That's 3 layers. I'm sure we could do at least 2 more and have good, honest discussions about that. But that's where we figure out why certain problems exist. If we understand why the problems exist, we can address them a lot more effectively.
That's a great point. You seem to have an investigative mindset. Maybe you should have been in DFIR.
I'm not nearly smart enough to do DFIR. Those folks are wild, but man, I tell you, right, a lot of that, I think it just comes from having an awesome kid and having an awesome daughter. That's one of the things that I picked up on, which is like, she asked me why. You know what? I can't be frustrated that you're asking me why, because if I can't satisfy that curiosity, do I really understand? No. And that's where, like, to give her the shout out if she watches this in years when she actually cares about work and career and stuff. But it's right. That's one of those things that I think we miss to a degree, right? We see ourselves in security, and I think we are, not just we see ourselves, we are a creative bunch in general, and curious, not creative. Well, creative too, but a curious bunch. But I think we've kind of lost that element of, no, I really want to understand. I really want to know why. And that comes with sometimes just doing the very, very simple, very basic and fundamental asking of why, until we just can't anymore. So
That's a great place to end. Chris, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so?
yes, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm still figuring out how to handle my inbox there, but look for this goober face on LinkedIn. I will never turn you away. It might take me a while to get back to a conversation or schedule a call, but I'm always willing to chat, as long as you're willing to put up with my delays and the sorries and sorry I missed this message, but I will get back to you. So LinkedIn is going to be the best way.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Pete. See you, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.